All right. So good morning, guys. We will start today's class. So today we will move to chapter three. Okay. So this is the final chapter in your module one. Okay. So module one is fairly vast. Okay. So so we covered the first module up to first chapter up to PRAM and VLSI models, and in the second chapter we covered all the dependencies, conditions for all parallelism, and in the last class we saw about system interconnect architectures, different topologies, static network, dynamic network. Now this chapter, what we are going to see today, okay, it starts with the performance metrics. Okay, so we're going to see the principles of scalable performance. So that's what this chapter is about. So we will start with performance metrics and measures. If you ask me, I would say this is the heart of your entire ACA subject. So if you understand this one topic, it means that you can easily grasp all the other chapters. So everything revolves around this. This is the heart, this is the core of computer architecture. Okay, and this is also important for several other topics, like any topic that you work on, right? So any domain you work on, so you will actually incorporate these performance measures and metrics. Okay, so you need to bring in this as a factor. Okay, so without any further delay, let's jump into the topic. So we'll start with the basics of performance evaluation. So again, feel free to stop at any point of time if you have any questions. Okay, so this is fairly involved topic. It needs you to think a little bit. Okay, so at any point if you get confused, just let me know. Okay, so we'll start with a sequential algorithm. So whatever we have studied in our design and analysis of algorithm course, right? It's about sequential algorithms. So we always assume that you're executing this in a uniprocessor or a single processor system. Okay, so that is how we assume. So now that is just represented in terms of your input size, correct? So when you say when you take merge sort or any particular algorithm, quick sort or anything, so you just represent it by the size of the input, correct? That's why we say T of n for merge sort is, and then you come up with some polynomial equation, correct? So that n is nothing but the input size. But for parallel algorithm, it's not only the input size, but it also depends on the number of processors and so many other factors. So mainly we will deal with the number of processors. Okay, again, these are number of physical processors or processing elements. So based on that, your complexity of the algorithm will also change. Okay, so for example, if you have a for loop without any dependency, then you represent it in a sequential algorithm. The complexity will be order of n, right? But if you assume that you have n processors, then the complexity of that algorithm becomes order of 1. Okay, because you have a parallel processing ability. So your complexity also changes. Based on that, performance also changes. Okay, so we already saw some of the performance metrics earlier. So first thing is when you do parallel run, and then when you we compute speed up, and then we also computed efficiency, right? So speed up is nothing but the old execution time by new execution time. Okay, so if you take the same for loop example, the old execution time for that for loop is n, correct? And the new execution time will become 1. Okay, in ideal case, if you have n processors, each processor will execute one iteration. So since we have assumed that it is independent, there is no dependent loop dependency, then your new time is actually 1. So n divided by 1 will give you speed up. So speed up in this case is n. Okay, so n times faster. So when you have n processors, your ideally your system will have it will behave n times faster than the old execution time. And efficiency is nothing but your speed up divided by the theoretical maximum speed up you can achieve. In this particular case, your efficiency is 100%. Why? Because your current speed up is n, and the maximum achievable speed up is also n when you have like n processors, right? So that's the ideal. But in reality, your efficiency will always be lesser than 100%. Why? Because there will be some communication overhead and so many other overhead, memory latency and overhead, all these things, right? So then we saw about peak performance and sustained performance instruction. Okay, so these are some of the standard, and then we saw MIPS and MFLOP. So these are some of the standard performance measures we have already seen. Now coming to that, right? So again, we'll just reiterate the parallel execution time. T of n, we will represent it, and this n here denotes the number of processors. Okay, so this is not the input size, but rather this is the number of processors for execution. Okay, so the run time. So we will denote if you the runtime you denote by t. When you have n processors, then your execution time is t of n. Okay, so that's what we have. So when n is equal to 1, then it becomes a sequential runtime. Okay, so t of 1 is nothing but when you have only one processor, what is the time it takes for that algorithm to finish or the program to finish. Okay. So now speed up, as we've already seen, speed up is nothing but old execution time by new execution time. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So we're going to touch upon these topics: degree of parallelism, average parallelism, available parallelism, and asymptomatic speedup. Okay. In addition to that, we will also touch upon mean performance, efficiency, utilization. So these are the different measures, right? And these are the one on the left, the blue shaded box, right? So this explains the program behavior. Okay. So how much you can get out of a program, and then the one on the right side is all the different metrics and the tools you use to get the metric. First thing is degree of parallelism. So what do you mean by degree of parallelism? So when you actually have a program, so that program may not be completely scalable, right? So you have a program. Uh, the program will have some kind of pattern, okay? But at any given time, so if we take the small snippet of this for loop for I equals to 1 to n, a of I equals to b of I plus e of x, something like as simple as that, then the degree of parallelism can be n itself, right? So at any given time, what is the maximum number of independent execution that can happen, okay, in a given period of time? So that is your degree of parallelism. So in this particular for loop that we saw, right, so 1 to n, if you have no loop dependency, no other dependencies, then your degree of parallelism in this case is n itself, correct? Now on the other hand, you may have some at some point you may have a place where you have a very sequential execution. Okay, so you have what's you may not be able to execute parallelly, so you have to complete this step, and then you have to move to this next step. Okay, so in that case your degree of parallelism will be limited to just one if it's a if it's not parallelizable. Okay, so that is your degree of parallelism. Any questions on this? So this is one of the fundamental things that we need to know, because all other metrics and measures we are going to see is dependent on this degree of parallelism. Okay, any questions on these guys? So basically what we are saying is, if this is step so these steps, they cannot be done parallelly. Okay, so it can only be done with one processor. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you, even if you give like 100 processors, only one can be used at a time, remaining 99 will have should be idle only. Okay, so your program is going to have something like this. So in this case your degree of parallelism is just 1, but in this case your degree of parallelism is n. Okay, any questions guys? So now we will talk about parallelism profile. So now if you take a program, so it's going to have everything, right? It's not going to have only like one part. You cannot simply say this program is scalable with n, right? So it's going to have something like this. So it starts with your initializations, which is only sequential, and then suddenly you will have like a for loop that can be parallelized to n, and then you may have something lesser than that, right? So you may have another point where it is scalable up to some k, and then again it will be sequential. So and then it'll actually again you can parallelize it, but now it'll be some m, some numbers, right? So this could be like say 100, this could be say like 50, this could be some 25 or 30 something, whatever, right? So if you take an application, it's going to have like a profile like this. Okay, so where it is completely sequential, sometimes it is completely parallel, or anything in between. Okay, so that is called as your parallelism profile, and this parallelism profile is nothing but your degree of parallelism plotted with respect to time. So if you take a chart, if this is your time axis and if this is your degree of parallelism, so then you may have something like this. Okay, so this tells you at any given instant of time what is my degree of parallelism. Okay, so I can, so if you assume, right, a huge supercomputer, then you will know at any given instant of time how many processing elements I need to use. So if degree of parallelism in general is a function of I, so if it is I, then I need I processors to solve my problem in this step. Okay, I don't need to use all n here. Okay, so I can only employ this. So this gives you like a profile of your parallel algorithm, okay, over time. So there's also something called as average parallelism. So now we will assume that uh, we have n processing elements, okay, in a supercomputer. So this is a supercomputer or a cluster or a massively parallel machine. Okay, so there we have n processing elements. Okay, so maximum parallelism profile what we have is m. What this means is, if we have an algorithm, that algorithm as so in the previous example, we had a for loop, right? So in that for loop we have for I equals to 0 to m. In this case it is m, so we are assuming parallel profile m. So in this case you can execute m things parallelly, and that is the maximum you can achieve in this algorithm. Okay, so even if that is the case, you assume that your supercomputer or your parallel machine is way bigger than that algorithm. Okay, so this is a hypothetical assumption that you make, so which means that your machine is bigger than your problem. Okay, so we assume this is the case. Then you can calculate the computing capacity, okay, delta, in terms of mips or m flops or something. So this is nothing but the work done in a given time. Okay, so mips is nothing but millions of instructions per second, correct? It is nothing but how much work you are able to do in a given time. So that's the computing capacity. Now if you have I processing elements busy at any given point, then it means your DOP is I. DOP is degree of parallelism. When you have I processing elements busy, now you have your problem size is smaller than your machine size, correct? You have n much larger than your m, correct? So now at any given instant of time, if you see that your I processing elements are busy, then your algorithm can support, it has this degree of parallelism of I. Then we can calculate the total work done. Okay, so the total work done is calculated using this equation. It's very simple. Okay, don't get scared by this integral symbol. It is nothing but your delta times, delta is nothing but your computing capacity. times your integral of t1 to t2. Okay, so interval t1 to t2, you're integrating dop of t into dt. Okay, so this may actually confuse a little bit, but with if you have a discrete equation, I think it will be much easier. Okay, so it's the same delta times a summation of your I into ti. I is nothing but your degree of parallelism, correct? Because at any given instant of time, how much PEs you're having? I PEs, correct? And then how much time you're going to take? The time interval is nothing but ti, correct? So for that time interval, how much processing elements you are using? Okay, so that gives me the area, or okay, area under the curve for your given time period. Okay, and that multiplied by your computing capacity in MIPS will give you the total work done. Okay, understood? Any questions on this? Chaitra, are you able to follow? Chaitra, Vaibhav, are you able to follow, or is it way above the head? Okay, okay, great, nice. Then we have the average parallelism A. Okay, so again it's nothing but, so now we are not calculating the work done. So work done is nothing but you need the computing capacity and all, right? So now we are just calculating the average parallelism available in your program. Okay, so that can be achieved by calculating the integral, the summation of your dop times ti, and average it out over the all the time intervals. Okay, so you have your summation from I to I equals to 1 to m I into ti. Just give me a second. Hello, I'm in a class. Hello, I'm in a class. Can you please call later? So you have your average parallelism is nothing but you have your summation of all the processing elements available. Okay, the degree of parallelism at that instant multiplied by the time interval. Okay, and you do a summation of all these things. So it's nothing but this plot here. Okay, I think now it will become even more clearer. So at this given instant of time, so this is your particular time interval. In this, what's the maximum degree of parallelism you have? Okay, so that here it is only one, and here you have two. So and then at this point you have some eight or something, right? You can use all eight parallelly. So you have a profile. So this is your parallelism profile that we saw. Okay, now if you do an average of all these individual rectangles or the bars, that then you will get your average parallelism. Okay, hope that is clear. And there's another thing called as available parallelism. Okay, so please keep in mind all these terms. Okay, don't get confused. Okay, so we are now going to calculate the available parallelism. Okay, so on the optimistic side, so how much parallelism you can exploit, right? So currently on the optimistic side, we've it has been shown that 500 to 3500 arithmetic operations can happen parallelly for any given scientific application, right? And typical Fortran programs, they take 90 parallelism factor, so which is like 90% you can run parallelly. So these are the optimistic side of it. So you can exploit this parallelism in these ways. However, on the pessimistic side, the instruction level parallelism, right? So when you deal with one single processing element, and inside that processing element, if you want to bring in more parallelism, then that is limited to only 5 to 7. Okay, you cannot exploit more. Okay, so it will lead to more overhead only. Okay, maximum DOP achievable is 17 instructions per cycle. Okay, So this gives you like the both the plus side and minus side of how much parallelism you have in real uh, applications. Okay, and there is something called as a basic block. So what is a basic block? Basic block is nothing but it's something you can assume it to be something similar to a thread, right? So a basic block has a single entry point and single exit point, but you don't take any conditions or anything inside it. It's as the name says, it's a simple basic block. It will be few instructions uh, uh, included. That's all. Okay, so factor limit of 2 to 5, right? Go away. Okay, so with the basic blocks, you can push your degree of parallelism to one in the scale of thousands. Okay, so with that granularity, you can exploit that parallelism because in the instruction level parallelism side, it was very small. Okay, so you can switch to a middle ground with the basic blocks. Now we'll see about asymptotic speed up. Sorry, I'm just carried away with this COVID thing. Asymptotic speed up. Okay, so when you talk about asymptotic speed up, so we have degree of parallelism I, and the work done in that interval is calculated using I into delta into ti. Okay, delta is nothing but your the rate of work done, right? Your computing capacity in MIPS or MFLOPS, etc. And I is the degree of parallelism, and that's how when we saw that summation, right? So you just take one instant of that summation, you get this wi. Okay, so wi is that one bar in that bar chart. Okay, now, so to get the total work done, you just do the summation of wi and you get the total work done. Now you can also rework this equation. You can actually make an equation like this, like t of I, right? So this is a time, the time it takes. This is the execution time it takes for you, uh, execution time when you have k processing elements in place. Okay, so if you have k processing elements, what is the execution time it takes? You can compute that. You can rearrange that equation to form this wi by k times delta. Okay, so naturally it means that when you have one processor or a uniprocessing system, then your execution time is nothing but wi by delta. Okay, so automatically when you have k processors, it gets scaled, right? So k, that's why k is in your denominator. So your execution time will automatically come down by a factor of k when you have k processors. Okay, and now what happens when you have infinite number of processors? You have infinite resources, right? So generally now we have assumed that your machine is much larger than the program. But if you just scale it up, like make like so many process, like indefinite number of processing resources that you have, you will not get infinite speed up. Okay, so what will be the execution time in that case? It will not become zero, right? When you have infinite processors, you cannot directly substitute this k with infinity and you can call execution time is equal to zero. Okay, this equation doesn't hold at that time, isn't it? So what will you have? So even if you have infinite processors, your uh, execution time will be limited by the degree of parallelism. How much your how much parallelism you can exploit out of that program. Now this is a very important concept. Okay, so you just keep in mind. So when you have indefinite number of resources, you will not your execution time will not come down below a certain point, and that point is defined by your degree of parallelism, I. Okay, so that's why you have your wi divided by I delta. Okay, so it really depends on your algorithm, your parallel algorithm, how much degree of parallelism it can support. Okay, clear everyone? Okay, now to calculate response time, so response time is nothing but summation of all the time instances. correct? So how much time you took in step 1, how much time you took in step 2. Okay, so you add all this, you get your response time. And t of 1, it means that execution time, the response time, the overall execution time, right? That's what you call response time here. Execution time with just one processor. Okay, if you substitute it, you get this equation. That's all. It's not a very complex thing. And similarly, when you substitute infinity, you get this. Okay, so it will not be, your execution time will not become 0, but rather it will become wi by I delta. Okay, now your speed up is nothing but, what is speed up? Can somebody tell what is speed up? Vaibhav, can you point to someone? Hey Vaibhav. Not able to hear. Hey, yeah. Yes, now it is. Yeah, now you are audible. Yeah. Who's that? 144. Shruti. Hey Shruti. So what is speed up? What's the formula for speed up? Why don't you think? Let's think. No? What could be a speed up? So you're saying you have an old machine, okay, and it runs one program, and that program takes some time. Now you have enhanced that machine, okay, so you did something fancy. Now your program takes another time. Okay, we'll call it T old and T new. So now how will you calculate speed up? How fast is your new system? Huh? Yeah, yeah. How will you calculate? Let's. Huh? T new minus T old. Okay, I'll rephrase the question. On your old machine, okay, on your old machine, a program takes 100 seconds. On your new machine, your program takes only 10 seconds. So how fast is your new machine? Okay, so you have an old machine, okay, old laptop, and that old laptop, it takes 100 seconds for you to execute one program. You bought a new laptop, okay, and that new laptop, you run the same program, it takes only 10 seconds. Now how much faster is your new laptop? 10 times faster. How did you get 10 times? 100 by 10. So what is your speed up formula now? Great, nice, very good. See, it's not that hard, it's not rocket science. Okay, so speed up is nothing but your, thanks Shruti. Okay, say I'm just using you guys. Okay, so, sorry if I pick on you, nothing personal. I'm sure like others may also not know. It's just I'm just using you as an instrument to, for me to explain. Okay, please bear with me on that. So your yeah, speed up is nothing but your old execution time by new execution time. Okay, old laptop taking 100 seconds, new laptop is taking 10 seconds. 100 divided by 10 is 10. So 10 times my new laptop is faster. Now similarly, if you calculate asymptotic speed up here, so you have your t infinity, t1 divided by t infinity. Okay, so old execution time is t1. Okay, because that's my slower system, right? So it's the older one, so uniprocessor time, that is t1 divided by your new system is nothing but t infinity. This is the theoretical max. When you say asymptotic speed up, you have to deal with theoretical max. Okay, your time cannot be lower than this, correct? What is the maximum number of processors you can have? Infinity. Okay, so that you cannot have more than infinity, no? So that's why you're taking this. So this is the maximum, this is the best time you can get. So old time divided by new time, when you substitute, you get the delta cancelled out, and this is the formula for your asymptotic speed up. Clear, everyone? Okay, I hope it's clear. Now, ideally, your S infinity is same as your A, which is your average parallelism. So it's like theoretical average parallelism, right? So you will exactly match your theoretical max parallelism of the algorithm. Okay, so which means like if your algorithm says theoretically you can achieve a speed up of 10, right? Ideally you can achieve 10, but in general, right, in general you will not achieve that 10. Okay, it will always, your S infinity will always be lesser than your average parallelism. So now can someone tell me why is this the case? Shruti, can you point to someone, can return the favor to someone? Sumati, hey Sumati, are you there? Yeah, this is the first time we are interacting. Hello. Oh, you've answered previously. Sorry, somehow I didn't register that. Okay, Sumati, can you tell me why your S infinity should I mean is always lesser than A in general? The last point here, right? So in other words, the question I'm asking is, let us say I am running one application, okay, on my uniprocessor system. I have only one processor, okay, and so that it takes some time. Okay, but then I'm buying a new supercomputer of 100 processors. Okay, now my speed up should ideally become 100x, right? But it will not be 100x, it will always be lesser than 100x. So why is that? Why don't you think? Let's think here for a bit. We have a huge problem. Okay, the problem is a massive like weather prediction or something like that. Okay, or like some deep neural network, right? Like a convolutional neural network or deep learning algorithm. Assume some grand application, you're running it in one laptop. Okay, on one processor it takes some time. Okay, but uh, in if you have n processors, then your speed up should be n, correct? But it will not be n, it will always be lesser than n. Why is that? Why is that? Why should it take more? It's all machines, right? Okay, yeah, actually you were somewhere, somewhere there, correct? Okay, so if you divide the program, if you remember the previous plot we have showed, right? So you had that profile, parallelism profile, correct? So your, when you say this is degree of parallelism and with respect to time, Your ideal scenario is only when your application you're running has your degree of parallelism as n, assuming you have n processors. Okay, if you have n processors, your degree of parallelism is n, right? Only if your profile is like this, like continuously it is n throughout, then you will have your ideal scenario of speed up of uh, a. Okay, but what we saw earlier, so there will always be some kind of, so first of all the program itself will not support, and most importantly there is going to be overhead, your memory overhead and your IO overhead. Okay, because of all these overhead, you will not achieve your speed up equal to your A. Okay, it will always be lesser than your A. Clear? So that's why if you buy 100 processors, you cannot expect your 100 processing cluster. You cannot expect your cluster to be 100 times faster. It will only be 80 times faster. The remaining 20% will be overhead. Okay, so now let's come to this mean performance. Mean is nothing but average, that's all, right? So what's there to explore? The first thing is arithmetic mean. Okay, so here we are talking about ri is nothing but rate of execution, okay, of programs. In other words, it says how many programs I can execute in a given instant of time. Okay, rate of execution. uh, so you have a normal arithmetic mean, and here RA star is nothing but your weighted arithmetic mean. Is it clear now? Oh God, what will I do with this internet? Hello, how about now? Okay, yeah, let me know. Okay, okay, all right. So your RA star is your weighted arithmetic mean. Okay, where FI is the weight given. Now there is also something called as harmonic mean. Okay, there's something called arithmetic mean. Arithmetic mean is simple. So you have given Ri's, you just do R1 plus R2 plus R3 divided by M. Okay, you get arithmetic mean. And then when you have a factor weight introduced here, so you just do the same thing here. Okay, you give it some weight. In this case, everything has equal weight 1 by M, but here it may not be the case. Harmonic mean, on the other hand, is nothing but the inverse of your arithmetic mean. Okay, so in other words, what you do is you it's like completely the inverse. It's M divided by summation of 1 by Ri, so on and so on. Okay, so you do like one, you here you calculate Ri by M summation, but here you do 1 by R1, 1 by R2, 1 by R3, you add all that, and that goes into the denominator, and then you have in the numerator you have M. It's just the inverse of it. Okay, and again here you have a weight here. Okay, so weighted harmonic mean. Now where will we use this, right? So it seems like too much of work, unnecessarily we are complicating stuff. But let's take this example. Okay, so let us take that your program has two phases. Okay, phase 1 it has 100 instructions, and phase 2 has another 100 instructions. And in phase 1 you have 60 ips is instructions per second. Okay, so that's the rate of execution, right? 60 ips. And in phase 2 you have 20 IPS. IPS is same as your MIPS, but not in millions. It's just instruction per second. Now, can somebody tell me what's the average here? What's the average IPS for this program? Shubham, can you call out someone? Who? Shivam? Shivam? Shivam, are you there? I'm not seeing Shivam here. Shivam Kumar. Hey, Shivam, are you listening? Okay, Shivam is not here. So, can you call out someone else? Usha. Hey, Usha. Hey, Shivam, we'll give you another chance. Okay, later. So, Usha, can you calculate the average IPS here of phase 1 and phase 2? You understood the example, right? We are running a program. It is divided into two phases. First phase is 60 IPS and second phase is 20 IPS. Yeah, Usha, please go ahead. Wow, why is that? Tell me, tell me. 60 plus. No, this, see, the question is very simple, right? Phase 1 has 60 IPS, phase 2 has 20 IPS, and it is equally divided. Okay, so here you have 100 instructions, here you have 100 instructions. So here you have 60 and here you have 20. What is your average IPS? Why 60 into 100? You finally need IPS only, right? Hmm. Okay, let's not confuse you, right? Okay, so here you have 60 IPS and here you have 20 IPS. So in other words, we will, when you calculate, it becomes 60 plus 20 by 2, right? So this is your arithmetic mean. So which is 80 by 2, which is 40, right? 40 IPS. Correct. Yeah. So this is your average. So when in general we do average, we calculate it like this. However, when we are dealing with rates, right? So we are not dealing with mere numbers here. Okay, so this is a rate. Okay, this is instruction per second. So because it is a rate, you cannot do arithmetic mean. You have to go for harmonic mean. Okay, so when you do harmonic mean, it's going to look something like this. Okay, so it becomes 1 by your 60 plus 1 by 20. Okay, you have to calculate this, and then So you have in the numerator you will have 2. Okay, so if you calculate, what you'll get is what do you get here? So yeah, becomes uh, 1 plus 3 divided by 60, correct? Yeah. So you have 4 by 60. Okay, 2 divided by 4 by 60, or if you 60 goes into the numerator, it becomes 30. Okay, hey Shruti, thank you very much. 30 IPS. Okay, so that's the correct answer. Okay, 30 IPS is the correct answer. Now, how do we verify whether this is the correct answer? Now, let us take phase 1. Okay, in phase 1, you have 60 instructions getting executed in 1 second. Okay, so this is instructions. In phase 1, you have 60 instructions in 1 second. Okay, now how many instructions are there in phase 1? 100, right? So this is the rate. You are executing at the rate of 60 instructions in 1 second. Now, how much time would you have taken to do 100 instructions? That's going to be nothing but, if you remember your 8th standard maths, right? Direct proportions. If you recollect that, it's going to become 100 divided by 60. Okay, or it's going to be 10 divided by 6 seconds. And in phase 2, you're going to have how much? So 20 instructions in 1 second. Okay, but again you have 100 instructions. So what is x here? So it's going to be 5, huh? Yeah, 5 seconds. Hey, thanks, Shruti. Shruti, you're good in maths. Good. Okay, 5 seconds. Okay, now the total time is nothing but your 10 divided by 6 plus 5, which is nothing but I think it will come to 6 5s are 30, 30 plus 10, 40 by 6, correct? So 40 by 6 seconds. This is the total time. Now, to calculate the overall IPS, how many instructions you have? 200 instructions you have. And how many seconds did you take? 40 by 6. 40 by 6. So can somebody tell me this thing? So this is the total instructions, right? You're understanding how we are doing this. So in phase 1, you're calculating how much time it took. Phase 2, you have calculated how much time it took. Okay, so now you are calculating the total instructions per second. 200 instructions is total, divided by total time is 40 by 6. Yes, Shruti, can you please do the favor? Okay, 30. Yeah, thanks, Shubham. 30, correct? So if you calculate the total IPS, it comes to 30. Now, what did your arithmetic mean say? Your arithmetic mean said 60 plus 20 by 2, right? Which is 40. Okay, hey, thanks, Usha. So, which is wrong. Okay, so that is why when you have execution rate as your input, then you cannot go for arithmetic mean, but you have to go for harmonic mean. Okay, clear? Okay, hope everyone understood. And we also have harmonic mean speed up. Okay, so so here I'll not explain too much into this. So here again it's the same formula, execution time t1 divided by t star. Okay, so you get in your formula for harmonic mean speed up is 1 divided by your summation of fi by ra. And 1, you're assuming 1 because if you have a uniprocess system, you assume that your rate of execution is 1. Okay, but if you have n systems, it's going to be your rate of execution is going to be n, right? So if you, that's what we are assuming. So in uniprocess system we scale it down to 1. Okay, so that's why you have 1 divided by this other the harmonic mean here. Now here is an interesting plot. Okay, so in this plot you have you show the ideal case here. Okay, so this is the ideal 45-degree line where your speed up is going to scale according to your processors, number of processors. So if your number of processors is 4, your speed up is 4. If you have 16 processors, then your speed up is also 16. So this is the ideal case. Okay, so this line shows the ideal case. but we cannot achieve that. Okay, so we can assume different patterns of your program. Okay, so in different cases, so if we assume some kind of the factors, right? So this is nothing but uh, a probability distribution of your weights, so these factors. So if it is uniformly distributed, it's going to look something like this. Now, on the other hand, if you start with lower fraction and then you keep increasing the fraction, then you're going to have a better speed up. Okay. On the other hand, if you have the reverse way, so you start with a higher factor and then you go to the lower factor, then your speed up will also be less. Okay, so this is just an understanding for you, like how your program pattern and the way you allocate processors will differ. Okay, so don't worry too much about this plot. So I'll just we'll go to the next slide. I'm going to teach you one very important uh, uh, topic, and with that you will understand many things. Okay, so like I said, that's going to be the heart. Okay, heart of your entire ACA is this Amdal's law. Okay, I don't know, we owe everything to this guy Amdal. So this Amdal's law tells us how much parallelism we can get out of a program. Okay, so this is very important both from VTU exam point of view as well as computer architecture point of view. Please note this down. Okay, please remember this guy's name Amdal. Okay, so what this guy says is so let us say your RI is the rate of execution, right? And you are assuming that Ri equals to I. Okay, and W is nothing but the factors, the weight factors you have. Okay, so here you are assuming only two things. One is W1, which is alpha, and you have Wn, which is 1 minus alpha. Now, what is this alpha? Alpha is nothing but the factor, the proportion of your program which is sequential. Okay, so this is W1, right? So here you're assuming that one part of my program, like how much portion of my program is going to execute in sequential fashion. Okay, and you just assume the next extreme Wn is when you're using n processors, right? So what is the fraction of the program which can be parallelized to n? That will be 1 minus alpha. Correct, alpha, if 50% of my program is sequential, I assume that another 50% is completely parallel. So it's just two extreme cases we are analyzing here. We are forgetting, we are putting zero for all the in between cases. Okay, so this we are only dealing with a processing element of n size. Okay, so what we will have, then the rate of execution for uniprocessor is will be 1, correct, and rate of execution for n processing element is going to be n in ideal case, correct. Now keep in mind, you need to understand this alpha part. Alpha is nothing but W1 equals to alpha means alpha percentage of time or alpha parts of your program can be executed only in a sequential fashion, and 1 minus alpha percentage of time or 100 minus alpha percentage, right? Like, so this is the fraction of the time which can execute parallelly using n processors. Is it clear up to this? Okay, then your speed up can be calculated like this using your uh, uh, execution time, right? So rate of execution time was 1, okay, for sequential execution. This is the old execution time, but the new execution time is nothing but you have your alpha by 1. Okay, your alpha by 1 is nothing but Wi by Ri. So if you remember, we saw that formula sometime back. Let's go to that formula. Yeah, this formula only. Okay, so this is the speed up. Okay, 1 divided by summation of Fi by Ri, right? Fi is nothing but your alpha. Okay, and your Ri is the rate of work, correct. So now if you come back to that, you have your rate for uniprocessor single processing part is 1. Okay, Now alpha by 1 and the remaining portion which can be parallelized, there the rate is n. Okay, you got this? Any questions on this? Guys, again I'm saying this is very important. If you have to understand this, okay, don't think you can memorize it later and all, but it's a fundamental concept that you need to understand. Any questions, guys? Hey Chaitra, is your mic working yet? Hey Shubham, is it clear so far? Okay. So now if you rearrange this equation, it becomes n divided by 1 plus n minus alpha. Okay, so if you just have to take the LCM and then do all these things. Okay, so then you get this formula. So this is your Amdahl's law. Okay, so n divided by 1 plus n minus 1 alpha. So that's your Amdahl's law. Now what do we do with this? Now that's where it gets interesting. Okay, so why is this very important is because now you take a program, and let us say let's assume that you have a program that actually has two portions, right? Like we saw, say you have a for loop. For loop goes from n1 to n2. Okay, but this for loop has a loop dependency. It's something like the c of I equals to a of I sorry, a of I minus 1 plus b of I minus 1. Okay, so this cannot be parallelized at all. Okay, so this is a sequential execution. Now there is another for loop following this, so that goes from n3 to n4. Okay, so now here it goes your d of I equals to your a of I plus b of I or something. Here this can be completely parallelized. Okay, now if you say 50%, 50 is not a good number. We'll pick 80%. 80% of the time, this for loop, this n1 n2, right? So this the n1 n2 is such that 80% of the time my program has only this. So this is 80% of my program, and this is the remaining 20% of my program. Then it doesn't matter how much parallelism you want to give. Okay, you can only optimize this part by scaling. Okay, you cannot, even if you have thousands and thousands of processors, you cannot optimize this portion. This portion cannot be optimized. Okay, so this is a sequential portion which cannot be optimized. Only the portion which can be optimized, that fraction is what will give you the speed up. Okay, so that's what your Amdahl's law says. So now what is this graph saying here? So this graph is just saying this is alpha equals to 0. It means alpha is nothing but proportion of your sequential part, correct? If it is 0, then you get the ideal condition where your speed up is same as your number of processors. Okay, so here if you check, if you have 4 processors, your speed up is also 4. I asked Usha that question, right? So it is always lesser than 4. Only in ideal case. In ideal case, when you have completely parallel program which is independent, but doesn't have dependency, all the stars aligned, then you get this scenario, this ideal line, this 45-degree line. However, practically you will not get, because any program you take, there is going to be some sequential part. If there is a little sequential part, then it's okay, you get a good decent speed up. But if you have a worse 90% of your program is sequential, then no matter, even if you have 1,000 processors, see how much speed up you have. Your speed up is not increasing. Okay, why? Because your program is dominated by sequential execution. It's not fit for parallel program, that's all. Clear, everyone? Now, as n tends to infinity, your S becomes 1 by alpha. Okay, so this gives you the upper bound. It means that your program, your massively parallel supercomputer, whatever you have, it cannot have a speed up more than 1 by alpha. Okay, it cannot have anything more than 1 by alpha, okay, for that program. No matter how many processors you give, even if you give million processors, your speed up will not go beyond your 1 by alpha. Clear, everyone? Is it clear? This is very important. Okay, so we'll look at efficiency and all next class. So Amdahl's law is a very important concept. Please understand this. Okay. If there are any questions, please let me know. So otherwise, we are done. Okay. So thank you guys. Uh, so I'll close today's session. You can give your attendance and you can leave.